I'm in my zone, I'm in my zone. I'm in my, I'm in my zone.
How's it, brother?
It's okay. It's good.
It's
It's weird. I was enjoying our conversation before.
No, the conversation can still continue.
We're not. When do you start in? You fade in.
It's like whenever you feel like it.
Okay.
I think I always start with hello, so it gives my guest like the premise that we're actually starting.
Okay.
Like how you doing is like
Yeah.
I guess like all the viewers are greeting you with me together. So how are you doing, Jack?
I'm well. Thank you for asking me. How are you?
I'm good, man.
Good.
It's a very cloudy day in Joburg. I woke up and took like the longest walk from my place to like Delta Park and
That's
and around.
far.
It's quite far. It's quite far. I usually jog it, but like today I decided to take a walk.
What was going through your head?
Obviously this conversation.
Okay.
Settling into my new place. I don't know if I'm ready for summer to end, but I'm also ready for summer to end.
I like this middle zone of weather we have.
It's an interesting section, eh?
Yeah.
Because it's not like autumn yet, but it's
Yeah.
like a middle zone.
Yeah, how did you think this conversation would go? Now we talk about the weather. We're next to Pep Home.
Shout out
For
to
context, we are next to Pep Home, and there's a bed store. There's dial a bed over here, so it's
We're in a mall.
we're in a mall.
We're in a mall.
That's what they don't tell
We're in a
you
mall.
on Marketplan.
But like, I think it's an interesting location to have
like
a
it.
conversation. It's
Yeah.
unassuming.
It's in the mix.
Yeah.
It would be a bit more intimidating if it was in like a back studio of someone's cool office vibe.
What would make that setting more intimidating?
Just glass, furniture, chairs, a coffee machine, all of those things. It's
is it like endearing when you walk through a mall and you walk past like
it's honest. It's honest, and it's I like it more.
I
It's
hear you.
streamlined. Yeah.
How was your morning?
It was good. It was good. I woke up early. I went to my place and I shaved my face. Also for this interview, I thought I want to be clean shaven. Right?
What, is it like an adolescent Jack that you're going for?
Yeah. I don't want to be too grizzled and intimidating. And, I want to win people over because, approval of others is very important to me.
Tell
my
me more.
self-worth without that is...
But like there's something also quite like charming and endearing about like a tapered beard.
Yeah. I hear that, but not for me. I think it's like a tote bag or a beard with me is like an added layer of character texture, which I don't want to go to. I need the base template sometimes.
Specific to a white man or
To a white man from Cape Town, I think. It's like it takes you to a white archetype, which is just like, okay. You've already like, for me, and I do it as well. It's like I've placed you there.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're a template, it's like more people are a little bit more like, where can this go? You know what I mean?
The either opposing character traits or personality or style, opposing that is also a template of something. I don't think anything is like original.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. The clean template is a template in and of itself.
So how would you describe your template currently, stylistically? Or as a white male?
This is a good question. I mean, I think moving to Johannesburg has reframed things because there is actually a wider spectrum of white guys here, and it's a more interesting spectrum. And there's like a little bit more balls and a little bit more like emotional availability and vulnerability in terms of just like existing and not being so inward within yourself. Where I think I land is, this is a weird question to answer. I don't think it's going to work out for me, but yeah, I don't know. I think stylistically, I try and keep it like straightforward. I love fashion and I'm very into reading about fashion and stuff, but I'm not trying to be the template. I'm trying to be quite a clean palette that I can just work things onto so that your character is doing the work for you. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. Well, for those who don't know, you are a middle child.
Yes, I am.
You are. You have an older sister and a younger sister. Your mom and dad, obviously. For But like, how does it feel to be like in the middle? Because there's always this like connotation that like those individuals or human beings get like less attention. But I think for you it was quite different. Being the only boy, I think you got all the attention.
I think I got a disproportionate amount of attention. I don't think it's worked out well. I think within my family, I was also the firstborn grandson of my grandfather. So there was always that sense of like, oh, this is his first kid, his first grandkid. And, you know, grandparents have a whole other layer of ownership over their kids' kids. So I had that kind of level of attention, and I wouldn't say scrutiny, but I'd say just like awareness of what is this guy going to be like? He could be this, he could be that. And I was like a little blonde child, and I had quite potent character traits. I was talking very early. I was just imitating adults that I heard talking. And then, I think my parents also made me sit at the dinner table with their friends from a very young age and sit and talk with the adults from super young. And then even as a teenager, traveling with my dad. And there was always that sense of like, let's expose Jack to as much as possible. And because they could see I was very perceptive and curious. So I would like my dad would, I remember once my dad was doing a film festival in Victoria West in the Northern Cape. And I was about 7 years old, and I went to every screening and I wore a suit and I would ask questions at the Q&A. But it's not like famous directors. It's like someone with their documentary, you know, and I would just like ask questions. And I remember once I had a yellow collared shirt and like a black suit. And I asked 3 questions to this guy who made an animation film. And the audience was laughing, obviously, because I was a little boy asking these questions. And I cried afterwards. And I went to my dad and I said, why are they laughing at me? Like, and he said, no, they just think it's cute that you're young. And I was like, well, they should take my questions seriously. Like, I was hurt that they thought it was gimmicky that I was asking these questions, because I had genuine questions at the time for that filmmaker. So I think, I don't know if it's a middle child answer, but it's like I was allowed to speak and have an opinion from when I was young.
How did your parents' like profession inform the human being you became?
I mean, hugely. And I think it's easy to point to my dad's work in film and stuff, but I really want to pinpoint my mom and the TV station she started, Cape Town TV. Just in general, the way I look at her and the work she does is very inspiring, because I think it's very easy when you're doing something artistic to get into like the proximity to status and models and fashion and things that are cool. But I think she does really cool work, but that's also very politically inclined. And that's for a very grassroots, wide audience in Cape Town. And I feel I've really connected to that from a young age, which is like, there is some element of wanting to be in certain like niche spaces with other artists and relevant to them. But to see her relationship with her audience and listening to them and it being like mainly people in the Cape Flats and stuff, I was like, that's a relationship I want to have with an audience, definitely. Is I want a wide, big audience that's not kind of in adjacent industries to me. So I really look up to her, and I think that informed me. And obviously I went to their offices a lot and saw the way they work and cameras and stuff. And just that sense of, I don't see it in terms of a career trajectory, reading online about their career, but I see it in terms of like human relationships. So people who come into your house and you let them stay over, and it's like a filmmaker from Sudan or whatever, and it's like they're staying with you for 3 months, and you get a very keen sense of how this is a series of relationships that you impact people's lives and they impact yours. And then there's this output process, which is your career and your work and your image. But really, like, the work are these long relationships where you support each other. So I kind of, that's what I took mainly from them. That's what I carry in me with everything I do, is like going, okay, there is this outside perception and this image that you cultivate of like, I do this kind of work and that's why this is relevant. But really it is just, it's all every day. It's all these relationships that you have over years. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. And I think like our parents obviously come from a different generation and a different time, and their protests and struggles were different. Our generation, I mean, any youth movement or any youth culture, there's always like a protest or a rebelling against with generations. Our parents is apartheid, us is maybe like fees must fall. Coming and being a filmmaker and director in the context of South Africa, do you think it's important to like speak about or include some of today's protests in the work that you do? And how would you see that world? Because there's this expectation on young people to carry these loads in their creative outputs, and you from South Africa, so you should speak about what's the ill with the context of like our experience as young people. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't want to put some responsibility or impetus on other people. I mean, I have my own feelings, which is like, yes, I do think I think there has to be some layer of the context we're in. And I take that seriously.
Yeah.
And I want that challenge, and it's harder to make work that is indirectly speaking to a political context instead of going, this is an issue-based film. But I'm also aware that like in this country, and where people come from different backgrounds, they can come from a highly political background and be wanting to run away from that. Or they come from like a, you know, you can be like a Jehovah's Witness and you taught your whole life to be apolitical, you know? And I respect that people are going to engage with that in a way that they're comfortable with. But from my perspective, yeah, I think so. For me, I don't really see a difference between where we are now and back then. I mean, I think if you operate with that sense of like responsibility that our parents had, you live a more purposeful life.
I'm quite envious of the life that our parents live.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, obviously,
In
I
a
think
sense,
it was
in a
worse.
sense. Yeah, no, for sure.
You can't even, we can't comprehend. Because I think, I mean, to get real about it, I think a lot of people were just, someone was knocking on the door in the morning, and then you were put in the back of a van and no one ever saw that person again. And that was the kind of thing that was happening. So we don't actually have to reckon with the level of like how dark it was at that time. But I think on a cultural level, on a everyone together level, there was more purpose to people's lives.
And it's the purpose that I'm envious about. Yeah.
I mean, I'm envious of that sense of like not nitpicking at each other and going, there is a bigger goal here. Like, I know that person is this imperfect vessel but they're a vessel for a bigger idea. So I'm going to let them go to the front of the queue. And I think now we're like much more fragmented and siloed. And I think we're speaking quite broadly, but I say in cultural work and in political work, it's like been cut into a lot of smaller different pieces. Because I think we've been conditioned to lean towards what we disagree with each other on and let that determine a drift away from someone, and let that instinct to separate ourselves from someone lead us more than, we actually all want the same overarching thing, which is what I think our parents had when, like in the 80s and 90s and stuff.
Yeah, and South Africa was just like a different place at that time, culturally. Yeah,
culturally, I mean, but I think an issue we had then, which we have now, is responding to the rest of the world. I mean, I think we have an insecurity about talking to people from the rest of the world, and they come here with this curiosity, and we have this performative quality of trying to articulate South Africa to international people. Because I think overseas they had this 1, 2, 3 sentence punchline, what's happening in South Africa, and they were running with it overseas. And so we all became like jockeying for position to be a representative voice of what's happening in South Africa. And I still think that is, in some sense, what happens here is we we live in a context where the experience is magical and but hyper specific, hyper complex, and we could sit here for 6 hours, and we do for hours and like nights talking about our experiences in South Africa and how interesting or funny or whatever they were, and we don't get to the bottom of the essence of this place. But then you like having traveled and having met international people, you try and bottle that up to make it make sense to them. And I feel maybe we need to be conditioned a little bit less to just go, it doesn't have to make sense to you. Like what you choose to consume from South Africa is your choice, but it's on our terms. I think we sometimes get scared of the fullness and complexity of explaining our experiences here, and we pick the easy story to like give to them, if that makes sense.
I hear you. Taking that story of giving to people that come visit abroad, but I want to relate it to how you were brought up. Like you were raised in Cape Town, Jewish, like in quite a specific world and bubble. And take us through like what that atmosphere was like. Were there moments in which like you felt like the environment you're in was not necessarily how you were raised or connecting with? And what was some of few or one turning point that made you feel like I actually can't exist in this place as this one archetype or type of human being?
That's a good question. I think it was two-pronged. On the one hand, I had these incredibly progressive parents in their work and in their life and in their mentality. And then I also had this thing of being the firstborn grandson of someone who's very representative of the Cape Town Jewish community in a very specific iteration. And I think that's something my dad had to navigate, and then I'm inheriting that. So
your dad is a firstborn.
He's the thirdborn. And basically it's like you take on this responsibility of going, okay, well, we're still a part of this family. We want to be a part of this community. I'm still like, this culture is very valuable, and I was raised in it. I went to a Jewish school from when I was 2 to when I was 18. But then in my life, in what my experiences and how my parents raised me, I'm starting to meet people and see things that are really contradictory to some of the, I will say, unhealthy things that the Jewish community have held on to, and this insular nature and the indoctrination of Zionism and all of those things. And it's like you're raised in it, and it's complex because you have great friends who you know from when you're young, and those are your brothers and your sisters, and you love them. But it's like there's this fear-based thing as well. So I felt this responsibility to like my grandfather and my family on one end, but then also this like sense of pulling away and wanting to be in the country I'm in as well, and seeing my parents doing that, and kind of like those two things are in tension with each other. So I felt that contradiction gave me probably quite a rich perspective on things, because you can hear, because people are opening up to you on either side of this thing. People trust you on either side, and you get to like feel that out and make sense of people's humanity. But I'll say like the Jewish community, I lost. There was never anger towards it. There was like accepting what it was. But I'll say when I turned 19, 20, I started to feel like I'm not going to be understood as a full version of me. So I can show up and present a 3-sentence version of myself to you, and that's what you're happy listening to. But you don't want to be in the same place I'm in. You don't want to be in this country. You don't want to be in this, I don't want to be diminutive at the same time, but I felt alienated, and I felt uncomfortable with some of the conversations I was overhearing. And you never want to, I think when I was young, maybe when you're young, you do put yourself on a pedestal, and you do go, I'm better than these guys, I'm tapped in, I know what's right, and they're so insular. And I think from my perspective now, it's like I don't know if I'm better at all. It's just I know I was raised with that contradiction, and I wanted more from my life. But I felt I overheard some things that made me uncomfortable, that made me feel like you, my friends and their parents, I don't feel you guys are rooting for this place we live in.
What was those conversations like?
I remember it was around the time the Cape Flats, there was like quite serious gang wars in the Cape Flats in 2019. And they were considering sending the military in. And I remember I was in Clifton at a friend's birthday party, and like a bunch of people I knew were talking about how they need to send the military in, they need to sort out the Cape Flats, it's out of control. And I just thought like, nah, I don't want to be around people. We're in Clifton. What are we talking about? I remember that night, and I was like, because it was also, it's like, it's a beautiful setting and the stars and the ocean, but it's everyone's like, you know how when it's just white people in the room, things can get a little bit more belligerent about talking about the situation in a township or the situation in the country. It's like they'll navigate it with a little bit more of like a passive aggressive tone, but like once it was kind of just us in the space, I started hearing like conversations about the Cape Flats that I was like, I remember not kind of mumbling to myself and trying to work up the capacity to disagree in a way that felt like I would turn the tide. But then I was like, this is not going to really go anywhere. They're not going to come around. And that's when I felt like I'm in this context and I'm upset and I feel misunderstood. So it's like either I'm going to stay here and be angry or I'm going to leave. But like leaving is that sense of superiority. It's like, okay, he's studying politics, you know, high and mighty vibes. But I think when you're young and you have those sensibilities, you must just listen to yourself and not elevate yourself. Just go like, I'm growing out of this. I'm different to this. You know what I mean? That's a long answer, but yeah.
Did you ever think that your voice would like take you to like a political context? Because when I was introduced to you, it was an incident in Brackenfell, and it was a ETV clip of the EFF movement, and you were basically speaking about like how this incident was. I'm from the northern suburbs, so it was like very close to my proximity, but I had not known the context of who you are. It was like, you know, when you meet someone and then you're like, oh, that's that individual over there. It was like a endearing, like, well, it wasn't endearing at the circumstances weren't endearing at all, but it was like okay, I'm interested to know that if you ever thought that your voice will find you in or lead you into that like political sphere.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I always felt that. It's like how much of that side I want to embrace of myself, because I recognize that in me. It's always like burning, but I think I also recognize it as a burning. It's like if I was in politics, I wouldn't be like some intellectual policy. I think politics is about personalities, and personalities are representative of issues and of struggles. You know what I mean? So and that's true of nationalist right-wing people as well. Is like you are a vehicle for your ideas. You're not. If you stand up and talk about the policies you enact, that's not politics to me. That's politics is you being a vessel for an idea and a time and a moment. And I feel, I could feel the potency going into Brackenfell. It's like, nah, this will be. I wasn't aware, but I was kind of going in and I was just improvising in a way, but I knew what I wanted to say. But I think it's the contradiction of the mayor's grandson saying it. Because for me, it's like having that perspective as a young South African is not an anomaly at all. I could go right now and pull any young person out here and say, what do you think should happen with the wealth that's been inherited in this country. And I think we'd get quite a large sample size of young South Africans who were my age at that time saying exactly what I said. But I think it's that potency of someone from the other side who's at the Clifton birthday party who's saying it's that made the media create some mythology and investigate into my family and investigate into him saying this, because I think South Africa, it's weird in a way. There's not a lot of crossover. People are very aligned with their interests and keeping what they see as theirs. And I mean, I think they just ran with that sense of contradiction, which I think I only became aware of while I was talking to the media. Because talking to the media at a political rally is a very interesting thing. It's like working with fire and how fire catches on. So I remember talking to like a guy from a Muslim radio station, random guy, because I was in a car with two EFF guys, and I was talking, and I remember like all these reporters and journalists starting in the middle of their interviews, turning around, looking at me. And then every time I started walking, there was like 3 or 4 people following me. And then there would be like 10 people following me, and then 15 people following me. So I don't think the media's instincts are to have a conversation like this. They're interested in getting 30 seconds to a minute and a half of something fiery, especially in that context. And I felt in that moment, I understood that there's a high school, there was racism at this high school. It's not a new thing. It will probably continue to happen, but maybe with all the attention I'm getting, I can also redirect this conversation to something specific to me, which is something empty I felt I was growing up around, which is, and not to be patronizing about this, because I don't think any of us are immune to this, but people who have grown up in extreme wealth, who have kind of disregarded the context of the country that they live in, and they're like going to Europe or just like partying, or just, it's just like becoming like a bit aimless, the existence. And I felt that awareness of that kind of existence felt very potent to me on the one hand. And then on the other, I felt there was this high school media thing going on. And I thought maybe we should redirect it to like a longer conversation about where's this all heading. Because I also feel personally some responsibility to rich kids who've grown up with money to like go, what's our long-term how are we situating ourselves in South Africa? Are we really here to just keep extracting from this country and keep blaming other people for why this doesn't work, whilst inheriting like all this shit that we don't know what to do with? I think there needs to be maybe some calm evolution within everyone personally of like, okay, well, what am I going to give of myself over to this place? I'm still here. I'm still safe, actually. As much fear as, a lot of fear is sold to white South Africans. I think you're here, and this is actually a good place to be. This is a really great country. I felt the impetus of like, how can we reorient that conversation a little bit and situate ourselves here with a little bit more of a continuity plan.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And then was there any like sense of like betrayal for your family's heritage, the community you grew up in, and the friends you once had?
Yes. It was the most painful experience of my life. I don't think I'll ever have an experience like that, because obviously then you leave there and it's just like my phone and my life is blowing up. And it's all these people that you know from when you're a baby who have different expectations for you, who feel also entitled to tell you what is wrong with what you did. And that was very painful because at the end of the day, I thought all the memories we shared and the time and the family and the community and the support would transcend your politics, and you'd go, you know what? Because at the end of the day, it's like there's Afrikaans guys who putting my address on like their WhatsApp groups and circulating my number and stuff. So I thought, and I was getting chased down the street and followed in cars and stuff. And I thought that sense of protection over me as a person who's been in your life since we were young would transcend, oh, but like, I don't agree with you doing that. And in a lot of cases it didn't, and it still doesn't. Like, I don't talk to people, even in my family, who are still like hung up about that. Or so like that was it for them. But in a way, you have to place it in a context. You know, my dad, he was 21 and he got detained when he was at university. And my grandfather was the mayor at the time. And it was a big political scandal for him, for my grandfather. And it was painful, but my dad was like, a lot of people alienated me, but I was like, I was doing the right thing, what I believe is the right thing. And so it's in a context. It's not like, there's no sense of like, oh, I did it and I proved the point. It's like, oh, I was raised this way by this person who went through something similar in a different period and context. And I think the way I processed that experience and the day I had when I went to Brackenfell was so visceral and felt so alive, and it's not just the day, it's like it was an evolution in my thinking over time that culminated in that. But it's in a context. It's in a context, I feel, of maybe a split within our community, which is to say there's people who want to be a part of South Africa and want to be part of this evolution of this country, and then certain other people who feel like, let's protect ourselves, let's be more inward. And I don't judge anyone like that, because there is a generational and historical scars that they're tending to by receding within. But I wanted to talk to their, more than anything, I wanted to talk to their kids, because their parents were navigating things and were sometimes children of immigrants, and there's like a whole, you are passed down your parents and a sense of protective mindset. But now it's like us here, and a lot of us are still here, and it's like we should actually not just on a moral position, but on a pragmatic position, we should be concerned with the place we live in and building it up in a long-lasting, equitable way that addresses the wounds and tends to the wounds of other people who've had a very extractive relationship with people from outside the country. So, yeah, there was a lot of a sense of like alienation and hurt and pain. But then on the other hand, it was like all these people I don't know who are like showering praise on me. And I think for a 21-year-old, that was a lot to process. Yeah.
Now you decide that like you're leaving this whole atmosphere and sense of betrayal behind, and you pivot and move to Johannesburg. A big idea for us who comes from Cape Town, because it's obviously a cosmopolitan place, a direct representation of what South Africa is on a pulse, on a human level. Not to diminish other parts of South Africa, but I guess it's like our biggest export.
Yeah.
Take me through that period. You moved to Bertram's.
I moved to Bertram's, yeah. I moved to, like Bertram's, Yeoville area, like bounced around. I mean, it was
the same area your parents used to gallivant when
yes,
they were young.
kind of where they met and partied together
Wow.
in Yeoville and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I really look back on the pivots from Cape Town and that experience into Joburg as a really beautiful transition, because I actually didn't know many people here, if anyone.
Explain that baptism.
I would just walk the streets for, I mean, I just remember like December 2020, I was walking around Joburg every single day, like 12, 15 kilometers, because I really, there's a version of this city which I'm still very attached to in my work and in my relationships. And I feel like you are presented this facade, skyline, Jerusalem vibe, and I felt that emotion of those works of film, but those were ideas, those were notions. And walking around, I think it desensitized me a little bit to like, okay, actually, it's not that serious. It's not this thing on a hill. Just go and just walk around. And I really loved that naivety of that time and moving there. And then Bertram's basically became, I lived with a family there for about a year and a half, which was, I mean, a very formative experience because everyone in that house that I live with, I mean, I was there on Sunday. It's like my work and my a sense of grounding in the city comes from there. And maybe that's like, if I'd been more maybe like adjusted to the city, I would have come to the north and moved there. But because I had that basis of town, it still informs a lot of the purpose of what I want to do. And I think that baptism and that trajectory of town first, and then navigating the north and the parks and all the other elements was the right thing. It was naive because people will tell you, no, find a place to live that's nice, as a coffee shop, work, do your thing. But I felt like, I mean, Joburg is my favorite city in the world. From when I was a boy, I was like, what? This place is crazy, you know? Because you watch stuff on TV and you're just like, I can't believe this place exists. It feels overwhelming. It feels, you know, especially when you're outside it. So I like that I had a romantic relationship with it, and I still keep that. And I know you and I talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
But it's like, I felt that sense of responsibility to this place, and still do, because it produced me, my parents, me. It's like, so I think if we can, you know, when I moved here, I wanted to cultivate that image, and I hope I feel like I'm still true to that lane.
I attach like the photographs and the film you make, firstly the Kasi Flavor photographs you made of Shanti and the music video you made with Shanti Primet. I like those bodies of work like speaks to that Jack, you know, who moved to Johannesburg with this like idea or romanticism that comes from films or works of film like Jerusalem. Take me through that creative process. Is it something that you pick up while you come to Bertram's and it is informed by the environment, or I guess was the texture already something that was like subconscious and like you knew you wanted to tap into that part of yourself, or had you even known that part of yourself existed?
No, and that's a really good question. No, I don't think I knew it existed, but I think what I learned from that is using a kind of culture that people my age consume as a vehicle to put in things that would usually be treated with so much depth and reverence and, oh, it's like a book, documentary seriousness. And I think with the music video and with the photographs, I was like, why can't these things that I would have looked at in a book be part of like pop culture things on Instagram and, you know, in like youth culture? And I felt I can use sensibilities that I was developing and photographs I was making very much in a vacuum for very like purposeful reasons, but also stemming out of my relationships with people that I was living next door to and people that were letting me into their homes and stuff. Maybe it's like adding the element of youth culture to this will challenge me and elevates how people who are my age in Joburg engage with work that they see and go, okay, well, there actually can be real people in this, and it doesn't have to just be models. And not that I have anything against the wave of things that do that. I just felt that's what I could contribute. You know what I mean? And I felt those things come about in a super organic, special, real, fun way. I think the primary way those things happen is the comfort everyone feels and the adding on top of each other. It's very difficult to like put it in a strategic lane. It's like Shanti shows up to my house at 9 in the morning.
Tell people about Shanti. Who is Shanti?
Shanti Cullis is a rapper. He was the first person I feel in this city to actually understand me. And I think to a lot of people, it was like a lot to place in their head and took time. But he was like, there's something strange and interesting and curious about Jack. And we just really got along. And I would go to his house and we'd play FIFA and talk. And our parents were friends. And I can't stress enough how much that underscores a sense of trust, because it's like our parents knew each other in Yeovil in the 90s. And we're here now. And we want to do this similar thing. And it's like that sense of, oh, there's actually some version of your family everywhere you go. So I felt safe with him. I felt safe chilling with this guy. And I think beyond what he represents artistically, I think, which is someone who inspires a lot of artists and a lot of people when you're around him, the way he lives his life is super embodied and honest. And I think he'll always have that impact. When you feel safe with someone, you can go further in your own work and you can go, oh, this is what I'm capable of. And that taught me like the power of a relationship when you're making something. Someone goes like, just give Jack the space to go there. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know what that'll mean, but I know it was such an instinctual place that it was coming from. It was and I have to give everything to anyone who's ever been in anything I've recorded on the camera. They are the quality of the work. They are the honesty of the work. The vulnerability or the humor or whatever they brought is what it becomes. And I think my only talent is creating I wouldn't even call it a talent, but my only personality trait is creating the environment where it's like you felt comfortable doing that and you wanted to top it and do it again and again. And that's what I think that video is a result of. It's just like an environment where older people a lot of the time are like, I want to do this on camera because I like your guy. I want to do this for you guys. It's cool. And it's like, I think that's the thrill of making anything in my whole life. It's just seeing someone open up in front of your eyes. And it's like to share on a camera is like a very difficult thing. It's hard to trust people. But, and I think you probably also know, you have this sense of a thrill as well. It's like you have an ability to make people open up and be vulnerable with you. It's like an amazing thing to share with someone, especially when it's towards a piece at the end of it. It's like, oh, okay, we did that together, and letting someone share and you being the facilitator of that is kind of like it's like something you've given and you're like, I want to keep doing that. What do I do that with, this gift?
I hear you. I mean, we know you for making beautiful analog photographs, and we know you for making motion picture films. What feeling or emotion do you experience from making an image that you don't necessarily receive when you're recording someone?
I like shooting film because of how unpredictable it is and how much intention there is and how the act of making a photo is like a ritual instead of like a practical, let's get this and that. I like shooting with friends on film. It's like when you're all together, it's like the sense of, if we got it, wow, transcendence. If we don't, fuck, we missed it. It's got more of an athletic feeling to it. It's like a sport. I like that sense of the challenge. I like the competition. I like the pace. I think it makes for better images. That I think there's great images that you could make in many different ways, but the work I want to make, I feel, should be acrobatic and physical. From me, has to be hard on my body and a lot of walking and carrying, and there's a physical, bless you, there's a lot of physicality to it. And I just think that transports people more in when they look at it. And I like that. I don't think it's just film. The look of film is I don't really like have preferences about that, but I like the discipline.
What was the hardest image you've ever created or had to create?
I mean, it's an obvious answer, but there's a photo I took called Oysters in Midrand. It was very hard. It was highly impractical, actually, because I was bringing basically these completely opposite ends of my world together, but it speaks to what I was saying earlier, which is I was bringing like Nkuli and Ian from Bertram, so it's kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum. And we were shooting in Yeovil on the Ridge, which you're not allowed to go to. And I was living in the apartment next to it, so I was going there every day planning. But like the day we were supposed to shoot and everyone showed up and everyone's in wedding attire, the security guard supervisor was there. So it was just like, the guy was like, you can't shoot here, you're not allowed to. And the sun was going, and he convinced his supervisor to go to the spa in Berea and buy them a cool drink. But the guy was like, I don't want to. He's like, please go. And he walked down the street and he waited till he was like at the bottom of the street. He said, okay, come. And then we all five of us, Kumo and Mzianda and Ian and Nkuli and myself, ran to the spot where we were going to shoot it. But then the guy started walking up the street to come back. He wasn't getting the cool drink. So the guy was like, he's coming up the street. So we actually had like 3 or 4 minutes to shoot the whole thing. I wasn't thinking. I was like, stand there, look at this, do that. And we shot it and ran out. And then the guy arrived by the time we were out of the Ridge. And I think that's like the best work. Because obviously, usually difficult circumstances, and when you're doing it and it's a tiny team and whatever, it's can be impractical and the image makes no sense because you didn't have time to think about that. But in that case, the sun was positioned in a very mystical way, in that it was halfway going behind the buildings and halfway still shimmering up. So it created this like upwards light thing. And it just so happened to be the 3 minutes that we had to shoot in that location. And I feel sometimes that pressure and that lack of resources and availability creates something impossible. If you had planned it out and you had the location the whole day and you could shoot 50 rolls of film, it's just like not the same thing. And it was very difficult and very impractical, but it was like created something transcendent, in my opinion. Yeah.
Oysters in Midrand. You gotta give us somewhat of like what that meant. I remember you texting it to me. You're like, hey, what do you think of this title? I think I'm going to title this image Oysters in Midrand.
Mm-hmm.
For me, you understand your sensitivities and creativity. I knew exactly what you were talking about. Describe that to a listener out there. Oysters in Midrand, what that feels like or what that is.
I think the image is about where we are now in South Africa, or how I see where we are now, or maybe where we are going in the next 10 years. You know, it came as a result of really living in the city for a while and starting to notice, like, what do people aspire to in general? What is the life they want? And is that aspiration purely extractive? Maybe it's like actually wholesome. It's wholesome to want an older, senile white guy to take care of you. And how is that wholesome to me? Why do I not feel weird about that relationship, which I have seen, and maybe we've all seen, and trying to romanticize that in a way that isn't crass or disrespectful, but also is aware of the humor of the situation and how the humor and the complexity only stems from a country with so much pain and power. You know, it's just like all of those dynamics lead to something which is quite funny and unexpected. The title, I just thought of like seafood and the sea. And you know, this idea of like people go to Cape Town and have oysters by the sea. And then like you being in Mall of Africa and ordering seafood. And I was like, that's Joburg right now. Is like, I don't want to explain it too much, but that's it. Like we're getting oysters at Mall of Africa.
Yeah.
So we're creating this ambience of a life, but we're like in this, the grass is dead, you know, which I really love about this city. That's why that's why I love living here, because everything is created for ourselves. And it's a simulacrum of the thing we want, of, you know, luxury and oysters and stuff. So, yeah, and I thought I like the comedy of it. I like how funny it is, but I actually think it's where we are right now in the most contemporary setting possible. It's what I feel I'm encountering a lot of, which is the desire to be loved and to be wanted by someone who would have never wanted you before, who would have never looked at you and like seen you. I'm like very interested in why that's happening. And I actually think it's beautiful. And it's not just like interracial couples, but it's age and it's all of these things. And I think South Africans, and this is my opinion, there's a warmer glow to being wanted by someone unexpected to your context, and someone outside of you. And it's like that unexpected person in your life being able to see you and hold you is so contradictory, but also it is a warmer feeling. And I'm not sure there's an answer to what that dynamic is addressing, but I'm very interested in exploring it and always want to explore it, because I actually think it's quite beautiful, and it is a way of us collectively tending to,
for sure,
a lot of unresolved shit. You know?
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. Oysters in Midrand. Go look at that photograph. Really, really striking.
Funny
image.
title. Yeah.
I want to talk about one of the greatest South African films to ever come out of our shore, Jerusalem.
Okay.
2007. I think this is like probably like one of the first works that really like inform my perspective in terms of outside of like the television dramas that we used to see on TV, like Yizo Yizo, Zone 14, and to some capacity Home Affairs. Man, I can go on and on. Like everything about that film, the ideas, the characters, individuals like Klaki Kunene marrying Jewish, like white ladies from Johannesburg, but the idea of just like coming from absolutely nothing and seeing crime as a tool to, I guess, change your life. It's so true for many South Africans. And it's such a layered piece of work. I can go on and on about it, but I'd really love for you to share the devotion and the meaning that you take from a work like Jerusalem. you know?
I love that movie, and I watched it when it came out. So I was a boy, so I probably shouldn't have watched it. But I remember that's kind of one of the things that set me off, to have that romantic vision of Joburg, which is like, because they shot it on 35mm in Hillbrow. So I mean, I think, you know, people put anyone on a pedestal, but if you put Joburg city center on film, I really think it's hard to do anything wrong. I think it is the most cinematic place I've ever shot anything in my life. I just think the layers of things that happen and cross in a frame. But you're right. I think at the core, there is a really brilliant story about, and obviously it's like Robin Hood. That's the story of Jerusalem, basically, in a South African context. I think it was very evolved for its time, which is like, it was addressing the post-apartheid, how are we dealing with this? Who are we pointing to? Who's taking things into their own hands? I'm very critical of that movie as well.
Tell me more.
I love it so much, but because I think it has a pace and a texture and a perspective on the city which has never been done before, and no one has ever done it. But I'm critical of the depiction of the Nigerian gangster characters. I think, and it's something I'm carrying in my own work now, is like how South Africans have depicted African immigrants, I think, has been weak and not layered and not full and complex. And I'll point to District 9 as well. And not just on some like liberal perspective, but really on some like, if you're in town, these relationships are a lot more integrated and full between a South African and a Nigerian. And I felt that just base tension, which there is a tension, I think, in town. But I think just depicting it as tension, as the Nigerians as these drug lords, and the South African as like just trying to get ahead, I think it plays into this something which could develop into a dark strain, which is like South Africans feeling this superiority over West African immigrants, which I feel like if you're actually in town, everything is a lot more entangled and working together and working alongside each other, or just even in language and style and like that entrepreneurial spirit is entangled. So I would have liked to, I mean, it's in that context, they did their best, but I think in film now, obviously we all want to make films in Joburg and reflecting on that context. I would like to see that relationship depicted with more fullness. But yeah, it means a lot to me. I just think it's sexy. The way it's shot, it's just like dripping with a vibration of this place. And I think this place gets separated a lot, Sandton, and we put like different versions of the city and we cast them away. But I do, and it's difficult to pick one that encapsulates the whole city. But I like town because I think it's all there in town. And I think if you spend enough time there, there's like these shortcuts that have been developed to life, to fixing things, to building things in town. And I love that. I think there's a sense of formality. When you go to town, people still go there and wear suits and like the ZCC badge. And it is just like this other world existing in real time. And I think that film did a lot towards depicting that with giving it the texture and the layer of dust and not so clean, but not in a way that's like focusing on the trash, because that's not the story. There's a layer of dust and texture to it, but it's kind of, it's honest. And I feel like the Joburg CBD narrative that we have now from certain people, from storytellers, is very it's dangerous, it's dirty, the buildings are hijacked, and I don't dismiss those, but that's not the conclusion to me. I think the conclusion is that it's a picture of, I think, a future, which is everyone coming to South Africa and living and building on top of each other and building in these old buildings that old Jewish people lived in. And it's something very enterprising and forward thinking. And I like it for those reasons.
No, I hear you. And having experience like living in town, it's like the people there are, it's the most, I would describe like Joburg CBD is that like you are around people that are living, you know, there's life all around you. And it's like, I guess the true pulse of what South Africa is in CBD. It exists there all around us. It's, again, what you said, the most cinematic place you could ever shoot in.
Totally.
Wherever you point the camera, there'll be a feeling, a movement.
And not just cinematic in terms of how it looks, but like the interactions.
Exactly. It's so real life. And I think it is a blessing to call a place like Johannesburg home.
Yeah.
In many ways.
I like what it's done for you in your perspective. Because Cape Town, I think you were always navigating the city versus Kraaifontein and trying to bring Kraaifontein narratives to the city. But it's like to have the voice and the projection of a story, you kind of have to bring it to the city. Whereas here, you can be quite centered in where you are and find an audience, and they'll come to you. And I think there is segregation everywhere, but Joburg is very entangled within itself, you know, so like people in the north sometimes have to come to town. People have to go there.
Yeah.
There's like that sense of, no, we're here now, which I like.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that it makes people have respect for each other's situations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That doesn't really exist from where we come from.
No,
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
it's an abstract concept. It's the N2 from the airport. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. Absolutely.
That's the layer of commentary. It's
Yeah.
like there's like 1.5 million people, and it's like this, you know, it's N2 to the airport.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Literally. Yeah.
And it's like here, I think I've lived here for like over 4 years, and there's like deep respect for each area, what that means. You ask people, where do you stay? And it's like a signifier of something. It's like, because if you're in like 4 ways, it's like, okay, I'm just living there. But then sometimes it's like, oh, I live there. And it's like, oh, and you know that shop and that person. And there's like a relationship with all these people.
No, for sure. It's so connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to pivot the conversation into thrifting culture.
Okay.
Your long time collaborator and also one of your best friends, Kumo. You guys have, I guess, dabbled in the world of, I guess, depicting what this opening of barrel Denusa culture is and many different projects. I've always interested that like every Joburg kid who is or has a interest in popular culture or I guess style or fashion, the trajectory or the entry point has always been thrifting, upcycling. What has that process been like for you guys to narrate the stories of what that worlds look like, you know? Being Kumo, being a fashion designer, and I guess taking all of these garments and iterating his voice in it, and you obviously making the images, making the films to sort of tell these stories. What does that world look like? And how would you describe what is the, I guess, genuine way of telling these people's stories? Because the other part that South Africans or people that are not from Joburg don't understand is that this thrifting culture that's been made cool by people like me and you is actually the livelihoods of many fathers and mothers taking care of families. So please take us through what that world is.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like in South Africa, fashion is a very freeing vehicle to tell fuller stories. I think the way someone dresses is also a great entry point into who they are. And often in interactions in Johannesburg, I noticed when I moved here first, people would talk about what you're wearing first. And that's a way of like, you endear yourself to each other by talking about what you wear. So that was like the first social thing I was aware of. And then I actually went to Denusa for the first time when I was 17 or 18. When I was here with my dad, he was on a trip and I came with him and I went there. And I find Dunusa to be quite a mythological place because it's very difficult to give an address to it. You can, but you don't really do it. It's kind of like when I first found it, you're walking next to MTN taxi rank and you hear this thing and you walk and then you turn and then there's like, as far as your eye can see, there's just like clothing bales and everything. And I became fascinated by that, how I arrived to it first. And then, you know, working with Kumo, I think he's a singular artist. And I think he's someone interested in narrative as much as he is interested in construction of garments, and how the clothing can be this vehicle to talk about a subculture or a story or a person or a reference. And so I feel a lot of comfort in my discussions with him. We can be talking about ANC exiles for 2 hours, and then it folds into a conversation about clothing and how you can articulate that in a collection or a film or whatever. And I think it's just a sense of safety. And our parents know each other from the like 90s, right? As well. So it's another person I felt very safe with in that sense.
I did not know that.
Yeah, his dad and my dad and stuff. So I felt this comfort talking to him, and I felt like, okay, we want to make things with layers and complexity. And at the same time, I felt the narrative of thrifting was a really great vehicle to speak internationally to Europeans about our relationship with the rest of the world, which is they've given Africa this waste in their eyes, and they've said it's aid for us who live here, and they've been like, take all of this stuff, and in a way, in this context, people have created an economy around that, and something enterprising, and something where not just clothing is sold. It's like all these prongs of food and tailors and you know, welders, and it's like things stem from that like waste, dumping waste. And then like within that you have fashion designers like Kumo and Mace and all these other people doing this, who see all of the waste and see it as a source of inspiration. And I don't think they're unique. I think in Ghana there's a similar market and there's designers doing that. And I think that is all a representative situation. It is this like leftover mentality and the ingenuity of like younger people folding that and turning that into really strong, distinct, original fashion that is also very politically inclined. And so the fact that that's happening, I feel it's a great phenomenon to report on and to also share in European, in Western spaces, because it's speaking to, as much as like they are consuming it to soothe their sense of being worldly and tapped in, but I think their sense of a relationship with Africa is very warped, and what they want to see from Africa lacks complexity and depth and fullness, and they want something warm and fuzzy, and the village and the windmill, and you know, and not that narrative isn't valid, but I feel this is a narrative that challenges things and challenges their responsibility in the global hierarchy of capitalism. So I thought this is a great vehicle to express like some of our politics and our interest in narrative. And we just shot something again based around Dunusa. And me and Francesco made this film, and we were shooting, it's not out yet, but we were shooting there. And like you spend a day there, you spend a lot of days there, weeks there, and you see just like how interconnected it is. And there was this guy who sells shots of pine roots shots for men in the morning to give them energy. And I would sit next to him every day while we were shooting for like an hour, just watching things go by. And my great, I don't know, it's a ridiculous story, but my great grandmother used to sell my great-great-grandmother, I'm not sure, when she was in Eastern Europe, used to sell shots to dock workers to give them energy. And I felt the sense of the circular economy and an immigrant population, first-generation immigrants doing this kind of work is actually the fabric that it's the foundation that they're building so that their family and their kids can grow into South Africa and have other kinds of jobs and other kinds of aspirations. And I feel like the market and I really love what you said about the people and sustaining that. It's a generational foundation and job for their kids. So their kids now grow up in South Africa and are part of us and grow up with other young South African kids and become a part of us here. And I like that sense of timelessness and legacy that the resellers are building there. I think thrift can be very associated with like, oh my God, I found a Chanel thing here, or I found a Bottega thing in the piles, and that kind of competitive game to it and the reselling and all of that, which is also a livelihood and it's a thrill when you find designer stuff. My interest in it is the narrative side and the ecosystem that stems from there. And I hope it's a lifelong thing that I come back to, because the market itself is, in the same way anything you want to shoot is dynamic and alive and cinematic and full of moving parts. But it is also representative of, again, that future I was talking about town, about people coming together and working alongside each other to make a self-sustaining situation out of what's available, which I think has thematic answers to what the country can be.
Yeah. So in depth, man. And I'm really excited to see how your fascination and how you and your collaborators, Francesco Kumo-Mace, how this perspective grow in telling these narratives. And I think it's still early days. I think there's more to what you guys are doing, and we can only be just, I guess, in anticipation to see where it's gonna go. Do you see yourself raising children in Johannesburg?
Yeah, I do. Definitely. I think my parents should have raised me here, to be honest.
That's such a...
It's fine. I've said it to them. I'm not revealing it now.
What?
But I really think they should have. I mean, you know, I'm very grateful for everything.
What are you saying?
No. I just think it's like, in a way, I'm aware of what raising someone in Cape Town can do, and I see it, and it's like a very active choice to go, I can't do this anymore. But here it's like kids who grow up here are very resilient, and I like them, man. I get along with people who grew up here, and because there's such a sense of migration here, most people are from Mafikeng or Kimberley or Durban or whatever, they come in. Like, I've become very close with people who grew up here and were born here. And I really like their mentality. And I think my child, I don't know, I can't put a word to what it is, but I think like children, I want to have, obviously raise my kids in South Africa. I want them to still have that cosmopolitan, worldly, curious, thoughtful perspective. I don't want them to be so like into their walks and their friends and the dogs. And I mean, I'm not to pin Cape Town into such superficial things, but I can see how that happens there. It's very easy to not be dependent on the social fabric for your sense of fulfillment. Whereas here, you are dependent on the social fabric to feel alive and a human being. And I think a kid, my child, must have that, must be engaged with other people's lives to get their sense of self-worth, and making that person feel seen is where you get your sense of, I'm a person. I think it's very important. that.
What about South African youth you find the most fascinating?
South African youth. Power and wealth are these concepts that I think older people have let dictate the dynamics, the social dynamics. So they always do, wherever you go in the world. But in a weird way, it's like young people in South Africa don't let power and wealth immediately determine who gets the most talking time on the mic. I think your magnetism and your ability to make people feel seen is actually more important. And I think people with money in South Africa know that they don't jump to the front of the queue in social dynamics. And they respect people who have cultural capital or work hard or have a magnetism. They see that as like, that's the talking stick. And I think that's really unique because I've spent time in America last year, a lot of time. And it's like money and power determines who is setting the agenda. That's just the reality. And it's, people are not like, it's like deep within them, within their bones, within their body to just be following where the money and the power is at. And I think South African youth, it's like a meritocracy. It's like whoever has that aura is like where we're following. And I really like that. I like that it's not just aspirant and just, fuck, that's cool. That person is fly. They have money. They're going to sort me out. That's not what determines things. What else fascinates me is suburban middle-class South African kids, like Litweezy phenomenon. That thing is like, I think, a product of suburban malaise, suburban boredom. And they're responding to something which is very clean and like repetitive in their life. And they're latching onto things which are posing as rebellious, but are not destructive. Do you know what I'm saying? Like Litweezy's, I don't think any of that, not that that's a huge phenomenon happening right now. It's not kids running through the mall. Yeah. But it's like, what I saw in that moment was, it was rebellious, it was freeing, it was expressing, but it wasn't destructive. And it was, people could dress how they want and go to shopping malls and do whatever they want. And I think it's like, as much as there's this desire to paint youth culture as like punk, destroying things, I think South African young people are quite supportive of one another and not really trying to burn much down. And I like to see that. I like to see what's happening there. I think if you go within it and you talk to people, there's something very generative and soft and caring and considerate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment in your heart, or is there a moment in your heart where you feel like your dad could ever produce a piece of work that you'd make? And if you guys had that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is he hard on you when it comes to the things you make? Like hypercritical?
No. He's very supportive. I think I'm quite different to him, in my opinion. I think he's got an amazing, one-of-a-kind warmth and personality and an ability to make people feel heard. And he knows how to speak to artists that make them feel seen. And he knows how to speak to business, money people so that they feel seen. And that's an incredible gift that I do not have. I think I'm more pointed and opinionated, and I think that's why I make film. That's why I want to, that's why I direct films. But in a way, it's like I feel such kinship with him because my whole sense of responsibility about wanting to paint a more complex picture of the country we're from comes from him seeing more for this country and this continent in terms of how we represent what's happening. I think it's so easy to also fall into like a liberal do-gooder, the safety of that depiction. But I think he's always been interested in honest and real and complex depictions of the continent. And I really like his instincts. I think my instincts are more sharp and maybe aggressive and pointed and somewhat divisive. But I don't think he's like offended by that. So, I mean, I would love to work with him, and I like the work he does, but the moments of my life I'm in now is very building a voice and a world that I can tap into when I make more ambitious projects. So there's just a cast of characters and worlds and people and pockets of the city where project by project, you tap into one and another and you work with someone new, so that when you do something very ambitious, it is all encompassing. And it's not just this idea for a story we had, let's go and do it. It's like, no, it's built off of real work and relationships for 5 or however long. And I feel like that's my thing to embark on, and to find that language for myself. And no one can give that to you in any work you make. It's like your life. It's your life. It's the people you surround yourself with, and it's the practice of getting better and better at what you do and finding what you want to use these mediums for. And that's something I have to embark on my own. And but I don't think he's hard on me. I just think I know. Sometimes I show him something and I know when the attention is like, I'm losing him. But then I know when I've got him. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I take that seriously, someone's attention. So it's better to not be around me watching anything I do. Is like,
for sure,
give the space to watch that.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wanna get back to the point you made about the depiction of immigrants in South Africa. And I was interested to know, like, is one of like your works like Yahoo Boy like a response to that conversation? And there's quite a humorous element to it, you know, that you are delivering this message of like sort of like trying to speak on like redefining the connotation South African has on immigrants in South Africa, but like how has, I guess, humor been a tool or vehicle to help deliver this message in a digestible manner? And like, how does a Yahoo Boy, a film, or a piece of a script or film like act as a response to breaking down those connotations?
Yeah, I think it does. Well, I experienced that Yahoo Boy it's not like a word for word transcript, but I experienced that situation of like a son of a very wealthy person in Yeoville doing a scam. And
wait, so you experienced this?
Yeah, they actually try to get me involved in the scam.
Whoa, okay.
So basically there's I hope I'm not gonna get the JMPD to raid someone, but there's this thing these Nigerian guys were doing where this black guy who went to a private school and myself, they met us and they were like, oh, you've got the voice we need for this thing. And basically the thing is, you list a car on Facebook Marketplace at like a really good rate, and people call you and you make either me or the other guy answer the call, and I'm like a private white guy, so it's like more trustworthy, and I convince you to put a down payment on the car to deliver it to you, and then obviously we ghost you and block you, but it's like more reliable coming from a white person. Polished voice. Yeah. So they try to get me involved, but this guy lived with me for a week. The son of
the private school guy.
Yeah, he's the son of someone famous. Well, to me, famous. Yeah.
Wow.
And he ended up there. He's like sleeping next to, like, in my room for a while.
Wait, but you have to give us context as to why is he staying with you? Is he like on a thrill for poverty?
No. I mean, he's older than me. He's living in Yeovil. He's like 39, but he was like kind of in the mix of like Yeovil, drugs, that kind of vibe.
Okay. So he,
Yeah.
okay.
But I was really fascinated by him, and I was
as
like,
an idea.
well, I mean, as a
Yeah.
person, he
Yeah.
would open up to me, and I think when he saw a white guy in Yeovil, he went into the private school mode with me,
Oh.
and went to those signifiers of like impressing, that like those little themes he tapped on to be like, oh, that's a white guy, we have this rapport. But I mean, I was 21, and I was just like very interested in him because I knew his dad, and I was just chilling with him. Anyway, they got us involved in this
Scam.
I didn't do it, but I was fascinated by the scam, which is you could weaponize your quote unquote private school voice to scam an Afrikaner out of some cash. And I thought that's really potent and also funny somewhat. And so I kind of like thought there is a humorous element to it for sure. But there's some commentary there. And I also wanted to comment, I think what I noticed about him as a character is this inheritance of legacy as well. That a lot of, like a black guy who went to private school and maybe their parents were politically tied. There's such a heavy thing to step into that often it's like they go the complete opposite direction, which is excess with whatever. And I found, but also how they have this magnetic charm because they can uniquely switch to whatever environment they want to be in, right? They can talk to anyone in the city because they went to a private school. And they have this performative second, third, fourth, fifth skin that they can just weave into and charm to get what they want. But what they want isn't money. They want maybe something else, some purpose, or maybe they just love the game of charming different people. And so I became really fascinated with him and that scam in general, because it's kind of like and it's the reason I'm fascinated by anything. It's a situation that you find yourself in on a personal level, and it's a story you tell, but then you're like, oh wait, but that indicates a lot about everything in South Africa, which is if you are given the access to private school, you automatically have access to all these other tiers of life. Or if you have a relationship with English, you have all these other spaces and people who will let you into those spaces in industry, in finance, and everything. And I thought, what is that? That's so weird. And then obviously like the Nigerian guy who helps him do the scam, I feel like, yeah, there is some element of wanting to reorient that, as that's quite innovative. And he's seeing something useful to him in a South African to go like, he's noticing social dynamics that we're too in to recognize ourselves. And he's going, no, I'm going to use that now. I'm going to use this white guy I'm going to use him. And I thought that's really interesting. Yeah, and most stuff, not most stuff, but a lot of stuff comes from things you see and people you meet, and it's all a product of that. I can't stress that enough. It's like, however much you choose to partake, you have to step into the world to have anything. In my opinion, I think some people who make films study technical things, camera moves, lighting. And they go, wow, that's great. We should do something like that. I think I study, I don't study, but I stay very open and aware to what the world presents to me at all times. And I feel like my favorite South African photographer, Santu Mofokeng, was somewhat like that. He allowed things into his orbit. That's why I think he's different to other photographers and filmmakers who seeked out a story, because that makes sense to tell that story. And visually, that's going to be very interesting. I feel like he was a very perceptive, warm, inviting, and spiritually inclined person. And he allowed things to come into his orbit and open themselves up and reveal themselves to him. And I find a lot of value in studying that and going, it's a way of thinking, it's a mindset. It's like, just open yourself up to what the world has to offer. And your work is always going to stem from that. So, and it's a more elevated experience, you know? Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's a really profound description of like where that story came from. And I wish one day, and I hope one day you can actually make that into a feature. Yeah. Yeah. Touch wood. Well, it's like the only right thing to say. So touch wood.
Yeah.
Touch wood.
No, I mean,
yeah.
I think films, South Africa, there's a lot. I think we all will say. I think films are just not as readily available to just make a movie for any of us. But I hope you and other people build up a long enough practice of other things that supports you making a film, because I think it's important that everyone's specific voice is shared. And these films don't have to be great and make millions. You just have to make one and then make another and then make another, and then you get there. And I feel that way about you. I mean, I know what film you should definitely make, like, or the realm that you should explore.
Yeah.
Because you've showed me documentaries which are just like, I think a lot of this also comes from old documentaries that we watch. Like,
tell people about Journeyman Pictures.
Yo, what a YouTube channel. I think you I've watched stuff on there before I met you, but you put me onto this is the channel that houses everything.
Literally.
So Journeyman Pictures is a YouTube channel which is like archiving all these old South African documentaries from the late 90s and early 2000s. And you showed me The Cape of Fears, and a film about the Stachy brothers on there, which was just transcendent. But then I showed you which is actually Francesco found this one, the film about the Pretoria rave scene,
nightclub scene
in the 90s and early 2000s.
It's so crazy that
on Journeyman.
It's so crazy that like Pretoria was like lit since, and like they're trending for like other things.
Same
nightclub things.
We don't investigate Pretoria. We don't know what's going on there.
Pretoria, but
it
like,
all comes from there.
The pulse is from there. Like people don't speak about that, you know?
I think honestly, I think Joburg is the stage, but like I think Vaal and Pretoria is like where things
say that again.
Channel into here.
What's the two places?
Vaal and Pretoria. You know what I mean?
Real.
I think there's like a lot that comes from there that we maybe in Joburg adopt as like a Joburg slang or whatever it is, but actually it started
those
somewhere
two places. Speaking about documentary or telling someone's story or exploring an idea or curiosity you might have, I'm currently like struggling with like you like research an idea and like you fascinate and you are fixate on it for so long and you're like, wow, I want to tell the story. If I don't tell the story, no one else will tell it. But like I'm interested to know, like I'm in a place where I'm like, there's this voice in the back of my head that's continuously like saying, but like, what makes you worthy of telling the story? How are you able to overcome that and trust yourself and be like, hey, I may not have all the answers, but I definitely feel like I'm deserving. I'll nurture the story with care and tell it the way it's meant to be.
I think you have to have a very strong antenna for a situation where this is just a story. This is something I'm experiencing. I'm not gonna carry the responsibility of telling this. And then there's other moments where you feel immediately like the burning sense of what you said. It's not, no one else is gonna tell this story. The responsibility I feel is very much based on my relationship with that person. It's like there's documentaries and all sorts of work which is just purely extractive, which is like there's no before and after. There's just that moment and getting what we need. And I feel like there's this build up before and this settle down after before shooting anything about any person who's real or it's like documentary based, where it's like we feel out that relationship and maybe shooting isn't the primary experience that stems from that relationship. And at the same time, I never try and like justify my relationship with the subject in any documentary. It's like I know within myself like what feels like a full relationship beyond a piece of work or a product, and I know what my relationship with them is, and I know what happened there. But once you start putting metrics on it to other people about money and such things and all of those dynamics, I feel you start putting a price on all of this stuff, and you put what I feel are very tangible metrics to something that is the most intimate thing possible, which is filming someone and them opening up to you and you sharing that with a big audience. It's like the process of getting to that, and the process of getting to a depiction of someone's life which feels honest and genuine and one with like respect, goes beyond things that are tangible. It's a feeling of trust in a human being, and the process of making that film before that is like a whole sense of that person being the person you're willing to like open up to. And I can't give some sound bites about how you can access that as a skill. I think some people feel held by someone, and other people are just like, there's a camera, there's lights, there's an agenda. I don't know what's going on here. And I feel like you must just be quite clear about who you are and what you want to do. And a lot of the time people take that and go, this guy is honest about like what he's trying to say and what I can say, and use this as a vehicle for myself. So, I mean, to pretend like I can come out of this with a great answer that solves your questions and my questions is like, I'm not going to do that. But I feel there's a world of dynamics before you film anything, which is like a full relationship, which involves other things about your life and that person's life that you've introduced each other to, where I even feel I want to film something because I want to feel that basis of in a story, there's like that top line of why you told that story. Oh, they're a da-da-da doing a da-da-da. Oh, what a contradiction. But that's actually not, if you're going to embark on that journey with someone, you have to know more, and you want to know more, and you want to like feel we're going to discover actually what this is while doing it. If you know what I mean.
No, absolutely. Yeah, man. Documentaries are hard. Documentaries are fulfilling. It's the first way of film. Like, it's the first type of filmmaking that I fell in love with. And I think it's a process that's like ongoing. Or I'm reminded that like, hey, this is my first love, and I need to return to it. So thank you for that reassuring sentiment that can lead me back into my first love. And just to reiterate, like, Journeyman is such a important resource. And you can access any part of the world there. It is a very, very wide open, clear, uncut representation of a certain topic, a certain way of life, but particularly the South African stuff is absolute gold.
Something about the films that are on there is like this very unvarnished perspective on South Africa,
right?
But at the same time, not glorifying anything that's fucked up about South Africa.
And I know we shit a lot on the SABC, but like they've done some incredibly important work with special assignments.
I mean, SABC, it's easy to just get mad at it, but it really matters. And I think, not to get into like a whole thing, I mean, my uncle was on the board of SABC, and I actually feel some serious responsibility to all publicly accessible broadcasters, because that is actually where the most eyes in this country are at all times. It's like social media, those vibes, sure, but actually the main broadcasters is where we are like sharing not just information, but like aesthetic and artistic sentiments, right? So those things being vehicles for like expression, I think as they were at their peak in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was shit happening on SABC, which was so powerful, which I think is still resonating now for all of us.
Forever.
For us,
Yeah,
we weren't even
yeah.
like conscious of what was happening. I think it needs to be protected, and it needs to be more of a vehicle, because like for us now, it's like the vehicles are like online publications, magazines, and these kind of things that are zeitgeist and contemporary, which is important. But it would be great if it was like an accessible broadcaster where we could have a relationship with a huge South African audience. You know what I mean? And it would force us to make work that isn't so
vanilla.
You know what I mean? And in the notions that are international that we see on these publications, and we start replicating the voice that people want to see from South Africa. And I feel like the SABC just like cut that middleman out and was like, it needs to be potent, relevant, and entertaining to anyone in the country. And I think that's the task, that's the challenge I think we need. But on Journeyman, I think I was also very inspired by the aesthetics of the films, you know, just because obviously it's all shot on tape and old formats, and it's very organic. And I feel like that's actually directly something I've wanted to reference a lot, which is how old documentaries are shot, you know, because you know, in today's film and commercials and music videos, there's a language which is like slick and beautiful and lighting, but when you feel that visceral moment where someone was filming a real moment going down and the camera's responding to that, that for me is like very transcendent. And that's like something to chase for sure.
No, I receive, man. That it's the most clearest sort of understanding of what South Africa was. It's like on those special assignment moments, those journeyman moments of the Cape Flats experiencing Pagat, like what else? Like the Vaal experiencing like kids killing each other because of like initiation school, turmoil, influence, violence, Skotane culture, taxi violence, Pretoria nightclub scene. It's just a very clear of South Africa, a very clear window of South Africa, and like what the underground sort of like resides, what the pulse is, what the human beings are saying, what's life is like, you know. And I think SABC is like greatly responsible for that, and I wish there could come a time where us, I guess, new generation of filmmakers and storytellers had access into, I guess, delivering our projects or pieces into that. But I also think there's an arrogance that we carry. There's an arrogance that we carry. There's a self-conscious I want to be seen in this contemporary zeitgeist perspective and reside in all of these European acclaimed publication or media houses, and it's quite like it's defeating, you know. I have like long conversations with Wanda about this arrogance that we carry as young people, and it's, I guess, perpetuated by the internet and who our heroes are in like, I guess, in today's world, in film, in making images, in telling stories. And we can't only just point the finger at the SABC, but we also don't hold the SABC to that high esteem that we should, in order to connect with a South African audience and make work that speak for a South African audience directly, you know. So I think it's two-pronged.
Like, ironically, we love to engage with the signifiers of it. So, you know, it's like our biggest designers and all these references are to like mass South African things, okay, be it a bag or whatever it is, you know. It's like Maak, whatever. But it's like a lot of the basis for the inspiration of the work. But then, as you say, you said it brilliantly, is like we then aspire to like the European publication, narrative, packaging, and it informs our work a lot. Like even how I was speaking earlier about thrifting, it's like there's an interest in that narrative because of how it can speak back to Europe. But it's like Mzansi magic is here. It's like the offices are in Randburg, you know what I mean? It's like we could be operating in those spaces and trying to like push that to a more maybe artistic, complex direction. But our thing is so, you're right, we elevate ourselves from it, and we go like, we engage with it semi-ironically, and we go, it's there as a reference, it's there as a wink, but it's not like the basis of the audience. But I think there are places to meet. There are like platforms now where
That brings it together.
yeah, and I like that, how egalitarian it can become. But it's also up to us to make things that are like to make our work for that audience. And then the zeitgeist niche audience is like, they're always there, you know?
No, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Even when you look at like when like Gqom really started becoming popular, like the fascination of like taking this Gqom and shooting videos in a very like European artistic or digestive way has been interesting to me. And like some of my heroes, I mean, my biggest hero in South African filmmaking is Adrian Lowe. And I think his ability to, I guess, take South Africa and communicate it in a way that's not necessarily like European sensitivity. Like, yes, there's obviously influences in techniques and like how he points his camera, but like what I've always appreciated about Adrian, that it's like when you watch it, you feel like it's South Africa. And he was able to do that across every other region in Africa, you know? So it's not necessarily it's not necessarily it's not necessarily to say that like you can't, I guess, reach the heights that Adrian has reached if you don't go about it in a particular way. But like what I've always respected about him is that the way he points a camera always felt honest. No matter where he was in the world, you know?
Totally. I mean, he's actually like a template for so much that is happening in filmmaking and music videos. He kind of laid that groundwork in a very unassuming way.
Super
in a way that
unassuming.
wasn't like, this is Africa now vibes. It was just like, I'm the shooter and I'm gonna shoot it. And I think it's like we all feel in South Africa, we all feel the need that everything we do must be like, this is it now. And this is the statement, this is the best statement. But like,
where do you think that comes from?
you know, I think it's that international thing. I think it's the I think South Africans are very gifted orators across languages. And I think we're not, you go to other countries and people just make work. It's like, that was an idea, I did that. But here it's like we put the release of a work as like the great South African novel that sums it up. And I don't know, in a weird way, I don't feel that coming from the Adrian, any of those music videos. It feels very like,
honest.
Can you shoot this? I can shoot this. Let me shoot this. And we shot it. And then I just love, like you said, it is actually a very sophisticated global cinematic language that everyone in the country who likes hip hop or anything he did loves those videos. And I feel we're still trying to like fold what that was into something new. It's scattered now and there's people doing different things. I do think something is happening. The past year and a bit has been very positive, where I don't think there's the next Adrian Lowe, but there's lanes opening up. Different people doing different things, where it's like they're on that vibe, we're on this vibe. And I think it's positive. But he did something very honest.
We don't speak about it too often, man. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this thought. That's a very important South African
I think, it's
creator,
weird.
man.
We talk about it when we're all together and we watch the videos together, like, this is so sick. But like publicly, I don't think people talk about it really as an idea. But I see tweets
Adrian Lowe
from like younger rappers who say, Inshallah, one day Adrian directs my video. Because there's still that name on all the videos. And it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's important, man. Yeah, he's important.
Dope.
He's important. He's probably somewhere. The last I saw, he was like in America somewhere wearing a cowboy suit. It's like living life, married.
You know?
Like,
but I think it's good. The baton is like
Yeah.
onto other like and maybe it's good that whoever is taking on that responsibility of depicting like mass appeal South African culture in that elevated way is young and is still finding what that next iteration of that is. You know what I mean?
But then I look at like Sia Baba and like how he like does the release of all the like of his like fashion campaigns, and I'm like, what? This is like deeply South African. The feeling, like the themes. It's like there's nothing greater than that.
I think he's so. I love his work, and I love working. I've only been around him working once, obviously, but I was like, it is so. The way it happens is not how I work at all. It's like you get there and he pours a shot of tequila for you, and he's like, you can kind of wear whatever you want, and in a way.
Wow.
He lets you fill the space. And I love performing for someone I believe in, because I'm like, oh, you just go for it. But his instincts are with people, kind of just let them do what they do. And then his instincts with like his own work is to speak about like the secrets and the unspoken sexual and power dynamics that we all know are very pervasive, like in our personal lives and in South Africa, and the very male mask guy and the very femme figure and that like weird dance of sexuality. I'm like, to commit yourself to such a dynamic, which is so true and also so subversive, which is another thing, which is I think South African films and work can be conservative and can be like, let's not see that bedroom vibe. Let's not see what's behind. Let's suggest. But I feel like Sia pushes, let's actually see it. You know what I mean? We need to see it. Everyone else in the world is showing their shit. Like, let's see.
Let's embrace this truth, this nakedness. Yeah.
I love it. I think it's like that instinct that Sia has. I would be thrilled to just see it pop up in other micro subcultures and relationships and dynamics, because I feel like there's a lot of honest things that we observe in our social lives and in things we see, and we pick up on it and we feel it and we talk about it. But then to put it in your work, it's like your work should actually be the most honest version of what you want to say. But I think, like we've been saying, it's like there is this sense of how do we present, how do we be upstanding. There's a formality to everything and a safeness. And in search of congratulations and of pats on the back. And I think Sia is really something to pinpoint, like photography-wise, film-wise. I want to see it more of just like really subversive, uncomfortable relationships and how they reveal themselves. And I think it's like transcendent images have come out of there.
Overly transcendent.
Amazing
And we don't
stuff.
speak about it often. Overly transcendent.
I saw him last night.
How was that interaction?
It was cool. It was cool. You know, when you go through a shoot with someone, I mean, and they give it for you, they go there for you. I always like, you see them and you like, there's such care. I'll say, if someone's gone there for anything I've shot, I'm like, I always have that protective feeling over you, because I'm like, you went there for me. And it's powerful when that I think that's another thing, is like relationships between like the artist and the performer can like, that's where the truth actually can happen. You know what I mean? When there's like a performer who's pushing for someone with like an idea, like some amazing things can occur.
Happen. Yeah. Sorry. So it's two-part questions that I want to ask. One relating to the Latwizis and then one relating to the Sia Baba conversation. But one thing I would note is that like out of all of this magic you guys are creating that is like a direct translation of what South African feels like, is also these like standout characters or performers. Like the first person that comes to mind is like Tapelo, Nkuli, Mzianda, all these like standout like ideas of South Africa that is confident, and we see it like living. What is your message to individuals like that? Like, well, like what does that world look like?
I mean, it's kind of like, I'll say it's very dependent on work other people have done as well. Sometimes you're able to see a version of someone depicted in a certain way and you go, okay, well, there's something there that I see. And you run with that and you carry that and you elevate that at times. But I think it's also like they are as dependent on us to be seen as we are to tell a story using them as the vehicle. I'm like, when I work with someone, I really want to like do a version of them that hasn't been done or have them in a situation they've never been in. Because I think that'll bring something out of them that they've never brought before, like their best work. I think there's a lot there, and I think it springs off what we were saying just now, which is like within that interaction, there's not a lot of articulation of this is what we're trying to say, so do this. It's like you kind of just bring them into your world and your ecosystem, and they see this is the kind of thing you're trying to do. And then they surprise you. They like throw things at you, and you're going to jump at that immediately. And that's like all unspoken and a sense. It's a sense you start having with each other. So for me, it's like, I like this cast of characters we have, and there's always room for more. And my interest is also in bringing in people who are non-actors or not models and placing them in a context with a model. Because I think it's like, the quote unquote real person is elevated, and then the model is also grounded, and they meet somewhere in a space which is quite new. I think it's not modeling, it's not documentary, it's somewhere else, and it's like it actually levels the playing field of all of this. I think we all want to be referential to like ordinary South Africans' lives, but it's like, I think the work should feel more like we're depicting that, not like a model in that context. And that's why, I think performers are everything. I don't think any model I work with in a fashion context is a model. I think they're like a performer, and that's required of them, that carrying that on their back.
I hear you. And I think the other point I wanted to like hear your thoughts on is that like earlier you were describing these middle class kids as like Latweezes, and like, you know, they rebel not being destructive. But I find it quite interesting like how like the Brother Coopers of the world would have like South African nuances in the music and make music that speaks to Skotane culture, but the presentation is different, and how that's a new idea, you know? Like what do you think of that?
I definitely think it's a new idea, and I'm very excited by all the paths that it can go. You know what I mean? I think if there's an instinct to elevate things and be referential to the past, and to deepen engaging with just like hip hop music or whatever genre it is, I think it doesn't have to be rebellious or fuck you to like garner some kind of cultural relevance or honesty. I think it can just be like personal. You know what I mean? Referential to something, your brother, your mom, your sister, something they showed you, and I feel the difference. I think we all feel the difference between something strategic and something that stems from just you pulling out the files, opening the cabinets. You know what I mean?
From what was before.
Yeah, and you know, it's like as we can sit here and intellectualize rappers, say what they could mean and why that's going to be a vehicle to revive Skotane culture. But at the same time, as long as we have the foundation of what we like about old things that were genuine, and we see what's happening now, we must just look forward and run with what's available to us. Because once we're like contextualizing our now in another history with the intent of trying to make now history, it's like all become too self-aware. I feel like we should just be like very like looking forward, running with what's available, running with where two voices fit really well, and then that work will have a longer life because the work existed in its present moment and wasn't hyper aware of like, how do we make this forever? Because we're referencing this, so it's going to be like this now. You know what I mean?
I hear
My
you, bro.
thought on it.
Any like final word that you want to give there to rich kids in Clifton?
I think I said it all. I wonder. You know.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have just directed it to rich kids.
Yeah, in general.
Any final word in general, not just to your past life.
Let's build the country. I mean, it's going to be on us soon. Let's own the responsibility. Like, I think we put a lot of that like disdain towards how old politicians are, and they are, but let's own up to the mantle. I think there's so much aspiration towards being culturally relevant and not in terms of just like taking responsibility. And I feel that in interpersonal conversations, a sense of deep engagement with the state of everything and how our work in culture is a comment on that. But let's own that a lot more and carry that, and we're doing it together. You're not alone on a soapbox and cringe for doing that. Like having that purpose in what you do is very fulfilling, I think.
I receive, man.
And thanks for your podcast. I'm a listener, as you know. I listen, and I really like the work that you do, and I think you hone in on very specific people that I wouldn't have taken the time to listen to, and you expand like what can be made available for a lot of people. So I really like this podcast, and let's do it again next week.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, man.
For sure, man.
What a memory. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, this is the mayor's grandchild, Jack Markovitz.
I'm in my zone.
Okay.
I'm in my zone. I'm in my, I'm in my zone. Dancing alone in my room.